minute or so, and then we'll dive in. While you are entering, I would love to ask you and encourage you by all means to drop questions, any questions that you have in the chat. And we'll be sure to include in any kind of follow-up communications ways to get back in touch with these amazing individuals with whom you shall soon hear their pearls. And believe me, there are many. So, all right, I think we'll wait a little bit, one little half a second more. Okay, we're going to jump on in. I want to welcome everyone to the Poets and Quants Women's Roundtable. I have to say, I'm Kate Byrne, your host, and I run a company called The Toolbox, Tulle, where we talk about power tools. And it's all about women's leadership and prepping them to be aware, ready, and set up for all stages of life. In addition to hosting a podcast called Women Advancing, and one in the mix, which is an intergenerational conversation where we tackle potentially polarizing conversations between the generations. What a time to be talking about women in leadership. Did we time this perfectly or what? Before I introduce this extraordinary group of women, I want to call out two specific pieces that I think those who are tuning in would really get a lot out of. One is yesterday, I know that Poets and Quants actually sent out a fabulous piece talking about 12 inspiring female business school deans share their leadership lessons. It's a terrific read, great takeaways. So be sure to check that out. And then the other is today, Hillary Clinton did a really interesting op-ed in the New York Times. So the more information you get can only help get you ready for the future. But the people that can help you most are sitting right here. So without further ado, it gives me incredible pleasure and with great humility, I'd love to introduce who we've got today. So we have got joining us Tina Mabley, who is the assistant dean of the full-time MBA program from Texas McCombs School of Business. We have Kara Putman, who's a clinical associate professor, director of the Brock Wilson Center from Purdue Daniels. We have, I'm going to try and do my best to say this the German way, from Georgetown McDonough School of Business, we've got Shelley Heinrich. It's really Heinrich, but she was sharing she's in Germany, so I thought I'd give it a shout. She's the Associate Dean and Managing Director of MBA Admissions, as well as the Executive Director of Program Marketing. And then from the Forte Foundation, we've got Ashley Lautzenheiser. Thank you. Director from the Pre-MBA program. All of these women can speak to all facets of the MBA process. However, I've specifically asked that Kara and Ashley speak a little bit more to sort of pre-undergrad business opportunities and getting people ready to come into the whole process, and then what happens after. So without further ado, ladies, let's start from the very beginning, as the song says. There's been a lot of shifts and twists and turns about the role of diversity and inclusion in admissions. And there have been some changes there. Shelley, I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, what strategies is Georgetown using to attract and admit more women into your MBA program?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the recruitment cycle for an MBA or graduate business school is the whole year. So people are starting to look now for next fall. And we offer a lot of different events for different populations, but for women and those of diverse populations, we have many different things to choose from. So, and like many business schools, we have our diversity weekend. So in October, we'll kick off with a diversity weekend, focusing on women, but also on underrepresented students or those from LGBT backgrounds. But then we have a separate weekend just for women that's hosted by a Georgetown Women in Business group. They have their annual women's conference, but we invite prospective students to it as well. That typically happens later in the fall. And then as we get into the spring, where people have really kind of chosen the schools that they're applying to. They've narrowed it down 5 or 6 schools, but they really then want to get to know the schools individually. We offer kind of more intimate chats. So we launched a series of women in business coffee chats, which was kind of just that, coffee chats. We also did some lunches and some happy hours. Where we could just get to know the community, like where women could ask questions one-on-one to other either alumni or admissions advisors to get to know the real culture of the school. Um, on a big, broader strategic level, we've recently launched an organization called Empower Her, which is really designed to connect MBA alum from McDonough with both current women as well as prospective women in mentoring, networking, industry access, faculty engagement. So just, kind of a huge new initiative. But then we also partner with great organizations like the Forte Foundation here through their Forte fairs throughout the fall and other events that they do. So, I see this as we're all in this together in graduate management education to build the top of the funnel with women, and we all do it together and with our partners as well. So it's a little bit just quick snapshot of what, types of events, types of ways that we recruit women.
Yeah, Tina, how about you?
Very similar. In fact, our schedule is even similar in the fall. Our Graduate Women in Business chapter of our women here is a phenomenal group. We see so much student leadership in our women population. And one of the things, you'll hear similar things from a lot of our MBA programs. And one of the things that I've seen in our MBA programs since I was in school a while back is really the inclusion of men as allies in support of our women leaders. And I've seen that progression. I've been here for a while for men who are sort of curious, interested, and want to be supportive, to now really full-fledged allies who work with our women leaders and really help elevate the conversation for everybody, and are really a part of the organization in service of fostering women leadership. And that's been a really nice thing to see. And the Forte Foundation has been super supportive in that, and creating a curriculum for our male allies. And so it's nice to see that across the board.
Yeah. And I would think that it's, all the stats are in, right? About, how important it is to have female leaders in a business leadership team, just in terms of financial returns. I think there's a 10% greater return on equity when you have a really strong female team. And I know that those who have female leaders usually are about 15% more profitable. So with that in mind, Ashley, since, excuse me, yeah, you've been have come up a couple of times now with Forte. Are there ways that women can, prepare themselves from or get access to, opportunities for scholarships, so that at least financials don't become a difficult obstacle to overcome for them to get in?
Yeah, thanks to Shelly and Tina for plugging Forte. Appreciate that. Happy to chime in on that, and also expand a little on that as well. So obviously, the financial piece of an MBA is huge for every candidate, but oftentimes as we're talking to women, they realize they're planning and they're thinking, I'm not making dollar for dollar as men do in the marketplace. I may also want to be planning for family in the future, which might mean taking time off of full-time work. So the financial piece for women can be more complicated than it can be for their male counterparts. So scholarship can be a really important piece. All of our partner programs offer Forte fellowships, which are scholarships, merit scholarships, designed to support candidates who support the mission of Forte. So for those candidates that identify with our mission of more women leading, there are scholarship opportunities that are available from our partner schools. And our partner schools do select and fund those fellows. So they're making those decisions. Tina and Shelly, their teams are making those decisions about candidates who support the mission. And a lot of women come to us for our pre-MBA programming because they don't necessarily feel as prepared in the process. A big piece for the MBA also for women is oftentimes a lack of role models or support from those at work. So they often come to Forte for support through that. So we have a prep program called MBA Launch that we help women really build their best applications to business school. And a big piece of that is helping them build that confidence and knowing that there's others like them, but also helping them really be prepared to put forth great business school applications that hopefully will also result in scholarships, recognizing the amazing work that they've done. So making a plug for all of our partner schools there. And definitely, come to us because we have great prep, because it's about building that funnel. It's about making women realize that there is a place for them in business school. They belong in business school, and we can really help them prepare best to put forth those great applications.
Yeah. So, Kara, I want to hear a little bit from you too, just in terms of, I know you've done some, each of you, let me just put it out there. You each have interesting programs, but Kara, talk a little bit about some of the efforts that you're putting forth, not only in, the pre-business school, right? So an undergrad, but even some of the high school programs.
Yeah, so when I'm thinking about business school, I'm thinking of it as almost more like a 6-year process. Like this week, I literally have stepped out of a high school program where we're working with young women who are rising juniors and seniors. We had 50 some last week, we have another 50 some this week. And so working with them to see that business actually is a really great option for them, because one of the things that we run into at the undergraduate level is if you're good at math and science, guess where you're told to go?
Yeah, tech,
engineering,
code.
the hard sciences, things like that. And for a lot of women, I see them transferring out of engineering into business because they get there and they're like, this is not what I want. And so trying to reach them earlier and earlier to show them that, hey, business is great, especially if you want the data analytics and you want to really dive into the numbers. And so it's so much fun to watch those light bulbs go off as they're like, oh, you mean I can do this with math and with this love of science that I have. And so at Purdue, we've got some really interesting programming to get them aware of what business really is and exposure to what it can look like. And then some interesting leaning into our STEM strength and background with things like integrated business and engineering. And more schools are starting to look at that, but we've kind of been at the forefront with, okay, let's lean into that. You can do first year engineering and then focus on business. And we see that at the master's level, where we're launching a master's in business technology, where again, leaning into that space where we see a lot of people coming 5-6 years out of engineering, they've hit a ceiling in their career and they're like, okay, now I need those business skills. And so now I'm coming back to get an MBA so that I can move into management and into that kind of level. And so really kind of thinking of it as this whole course of there's this process, there's a progression. And so thinking from like, if you're not on the right track in high school, if you're not calculus bound, if you're not getting the right math skills in high school, it's going to be harder to get into top programs like Georgetown, UTA, Purdue, and get into those top business schools so that you then can be on track to be ready for the top MBA programs and things like that later. So we then send our students to Forte's finance programs and things like that. And it's been great to be able to build those types of pipelines. And then I'm also thinking about with our undergrads, how do I, within the center, build their confidence? Because they're going to get a top business degree, but how do I help them launch their careers effectively? And so working on building their skills, because we all know that that first job is critical to future career success. And especially as Ashley was talking about, some of our young women are going to choose to have a family. They are going to be having these different paths. And so how do we help them maximize time early in their career so they can make those choices, so that they can then think strategically? Maybe they want to do an MBA at a time when they have younger kids, so they can think about, I want to get that career, keep that progression going. I want to be growing. I want to be doing these things in a really strategic manner, but getting that first job launched effectively is so important. So we've launched a program for our senior women that starts in January of their senior year, to give them those skills and to launch them effectively. And it continues through December after they graduate, so that we're walking with them through all of those life changes that traditionally higher education says, good luck, kiddo, here's your degree, check back in 5 or 10 years when now we want to check, or we want you to come back as an alum. And so we're really helping them through that process.
And can I just add, Kara, I think that's so great. And I love to see so much happening at the undergrad level. And, I know coming out of school, there's this, or, going into college, coming out of college, there's doing the right thing. And one of the trends that I have loved to see undergrad, grad, is a real focus on apprenticeship. And I want to encourage the women who are on the call, go get experience. Don't worry about getting the right experience, but go get experience while you're in school. You'll be amazed at who will offer you, if you just want to go for a summer, but anything you expose yourself to helps to sort of narrow the field, because I know it can be overwhelming to look at everything. I came with a psychology background. I was raised by psychologists and educators, and I got a psychology major with an education minor, and came back to get my MBA because I knew that there was something that I wanted to get. And I love that about MBA programs and all the master's programs in business, really, that you get a good cross section of people coming from business, engineers, STEM fields, and liberal arts. And so there's a lot of opportunity. And so I would just say lean into those apprenticeship opportunities, and where you can go get experience, learn from people, and you start to see, every opportunity you have sort of tweaks you in a direction, and don't worry about it being the perfect thing out the gate. And I love the support for the first job, because I do think the first job is so critical, and sort of having that experience. So I love that support so that you can start to answer some of those questions for yourself. So that's one of the things I've loved to see at the undergrad and grad level.
And I love that, because we think it's a straight line, and it's not. It's our careers do this. I don't know about you, but mine's been like this cross section.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, now I see a through line now that I'm 30 years in. But back when I was a senior, I was like, oh, it's going to be this straight line. And that's just not how it is. So go get that experience.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I can tell you how many women I've interviewed, senior execs on Women Advancing, and thinking, oh, wow, great. Tell me, how did you do it? It is a big ziggy zag. Have a strong stomach, because it's going to be a heck of a windy road. But what I also want to remind everybody too is, given everything that's going on with technology, etc., what you're going to end up doing doesn't even exist right now.
Right.
It just doesn't. I think we all can sit here and say, when we were all graduating, this didn't exist, right? This sure is heck.
The important thing is to love learning.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Ever curious, ever curious. So true. So speaking of that, Ms. Mabley, how do we support folks once you're on campus? So you're there. This is where the I in DEI comes in, making sure they feel included. Not just the first day, not just the first month, not just after orientation, but it's a windy, sad, dreary, gray, cold sky day. And parents are worried, who are my little ones having lunch with?
Yeah.
And so what are we doing? How do you support them?
Well, I put this background on purpose just to see, in our business schools, and I speak for a lot of our business schools, that coming to campus, and there are professional programs that you can do online and things like that, but I'll speak from the full-time sort of in-person perspective, because there are important things that happen in person, and you'll see for a lot of programs, there will be, you can do intensives and get intense experience together, but really getting to know the other people in the community. And so you have a lot of people supporting you. The thing that I'll say also, undergrad and grad, there are people who are here to support the journey. They've seen a lot of people go through it. Use those people as your advisors, as ask questions, tell them where you're at. And then also, so our Women in Business organization has been phenomenal, and just they keep leveling up, and they bring people to campus. They connect with our alumni. They really build a bridge from prospective student to alumni, as Shelley mentioned, and really create an ecosystem where you can start to picture where you might be and who is in roles that are similar to what you want to do. The other thing that we see that is, and I'm going to make some generalizations, but we see early career imposter syndrome for women, just feeling like, I think it's like 2.5, or women are more likely to feel uncomfortable negotiating or applying for jobs that they don't have all the criteria, whereas men in large part will just apply for the job and then figure it out later. And so we have some programs in place that help with that early career women. We have a Women Who Mean Business program for early career leaders that they can come together and really think about with another group of women what challenges they're facing. They've been tapped as high potential leaders. And so we see a lot of that. And those are the people that we want to support, because you just want to kind of break through that clutter and have the support. We always tell people, and I'll say this to the folks listening, if you ever question what your skills, your value, your high points are, find a good friend and ask them to remind you, and ask them to be your hype person, and remind you all the amazing things that you're good at, because we are sometimes not good at saying those things for ourselves. And so getting that reflection from a true friend, you'll be amazed at how good you sound. So I encourage you to do that. Other resources, we do round tables where people bring conversation topics together. And our alumni have a Women in Business group that they come together also. So just lots of opportunities to bring people together and think about ways to advance beyond where they are. We also do salary negotiation workshops for all of our students, but especially relevant because we see that's where there's lots of studies that show women who don't negotiate their salary at the beginning. I had somebody in my office today who said, we have employers who say there's always a number on the table different from what's being offered. And sometimes people won't even ask. And so, but it's hard to ask. And so we have a class or a workshop on salary negotiation, how you have your information, how you present yourself. And, especially in a tough job market, nobody wants to look like they're being greedy. And so how do you have your data and your information that supports what you're asking for, not being unrealistic, not being, not asking just to ask, but having an informed ask. And so that's one of the things we do for our women on campus.
Which is really important, because that salary literally is, you go from there. And the lower you go, the more incremental. It's so important to do that. We've got
I think it's so important that the thread you're hearing through all of this is a word that I keep coming back to. It's confidence, and confidence comes out of a place of belonging. And so I like to use a belonging, and you'll see DEI, you'll see DEB. I like belonging because I think it feels, especially for undergrads, they can latch onto that. And so we're trying to create community. We're trying to create a place where in a school, in a university that leans so STEM, where women often, depending on the major, they may be one woman in a class of a lot of guys. And so I want to create spaces where they can just exhale. And I've got on my whiteboard right here, it says belonging means we don't have to try to fit in. We can just be ourselves. So it's a place where you can exhale. And when you have that place, then you can be more confident when you go other spaces. And so, whether you call it inclusion, whether you call it belonging, whatever, what we're trying to do for women, and what I'm hearing from all of us, is we're trying to create confidence so that we don't have to feel like imposters, because we know the value we bring. And whether we're early career, whether we're still in college, whether we're out in our careers and everyone else is like, what, you feel imposter syndrome? Yes, there are times I feel imposter syndrome. And so just being those vulnerable leaders who can say that then our students go, okay, well, if you feel that, then I'm not crazy when I feel that. And then we are sharing, here's how we do it. And we're bringing people around them so that then they're like, okay, now I know. Now here are the skills. I love what Tina was talking about. I mean, it's all about how do we give the tools, and it's a tool belt. We're just giving them tools. And I hear over and over again, well, what you're doing should be available to every student. I'm like, absolutely. I am not building a program that shouldn't be available to every student. My funding just happens to be for women.
Yeah. So true. Also, slight little shifty shift here, but still along the same lines. Place matters. I mean, I think place is another thing that offers tremendous opportunity. You could be local, it could be global, it could be on the coast, etc. But so Shelley, I'd love you to talk. I keep thinking about Georgetown in DC, the mentorships, the global, and right now, a fascinating time like what are some of the mentorships and sponsorship programs and such that you've got that are sort of integrating place and
Yeah.
all that that brings to the table, and globally too. I mean, you're joining us from Germany, so
Yes, temporarily, but yes. It's interesting. I don't remember the exact statistic, but DC in and of itself as a city has more women with master's degrees than I think, or one of the top percentage of women with master's degrees in the US. It's a very highly educated city. It's a transient city. No one's really from DC. People come in and out. But also with that, students have access to women leaders from all sectors, right? From for-profit, we have, Amazon, Nestle, Capital One, and then you have NGOs, and then you have 175 embassies, and there are women speakers in and out of DC all the time. And so DC becomes really a learning laboratory for all of our students. But in particular, with women that are here, there's a great cohort of very highly educated women. It's funny, when I relocated the first time to DC, and goodness, it's been, I don't even know, 14 or 15 years. I think the biggest change that I saw was that when you're, out kind of networking or happy hour or lunches, the conversation is all professional. It's what's happening in the world, what's happening in this country. It's a very enriching experience in terms of partnership sponsorships. Our students, for example, that are interested, let's say in nonprofit or social impact, they can do pro bono consulting for a number of the nonprofits in DC to practice their consulting skills. We very much focus on global at Georgetown. So all of our students will consult for an international client. And I think, what's exciting about that is you can do it outside of your subject matter of expertise. And for women, there's often this imposter syndrome. And so to get a chance to consult for a large company in an area that you're not an expert in helps to build confidence that, yeah, I can do this. I think someone talked about confidence recently. And when I did my MBA at Georgetown, I think, it was learning that new language, a whole new language, and then the confidence to speak up in areas that you don't have experience in. I remember sitting in a finance class and the first couple of weeks thinking, well, I can't speak up because there's all these people from investment, Wall Street, all here. But by the end of the class, after time, you speak up, maybe the professor agrees with you. So you gain this kind of confidence. And being in such a diverse environment in DC, you just get exposed to a lot, of diversity. The last thing I'll say is, we have 40 countries represented in the program. So getting to understand how women in leadership throughout the world is different is really powerful, right? Because, there are others the world where, women are still advancing, not even to the point where the US is. And so it's a great kind of diversity of perspective. I think, just to kind of close, other more internal programs within McDonough are mentorship programs, right? So we have alumni mentorship programs, alumni to student. We have second to first year mentorship programs, peer mentorships, so that, kind of someone who just went through it can be paired up and kind of give you the pathway to what it looks like. And then we have we launched what's called Career Connections, which is an alumni program that's not a mentorship program. So we have an alumni mentorship program. We have a career connections program where the idea is literally that alum will connect you. That's what they do. Like, here's 5 connections. You go connect with them. Hopefully they'll give you 5 connections. Hopefully, so it becomes kind of a spider web out to build the network. So, those are kind of just some of the things that we have.
That's terrific. Another thing that I would love everyone who's tuning in to be aware of too is just, I think it's important to realize what your presence in the classroom brings, and that while you may feel that you either don't belong or what am I doing here, or there's imposter syndrome, oh my gosh, thanks to you, you're really enriching and enhancing the entire experience for everyone around you. And so, Ashley, I wanted to ask if you had some interesting stats to talk a little bit, or could share a little bit about, some of the benefits of gender diversity in in business school in general.
Yeah, and I think when we kicked off, Kate, you had some great ones to share. So you stole a couple of mine, but I'll forgive you. But I will say there's, I think if, it's kind of before I was thinking, oh, there's a couple great articles I'm going to pull. So I will say, if you're not familiar with it, my usual go-to is the McKinsey Women in the Workplace study. It comes out every year. It's like, if you haven't read it, it is always amazing and eye-opening. McKinsey also does one around diversity, and it's very specific about how diverse teams impact outcomes in business. And at the end of the day, more diverse teams make businesses more money. And if you don't care about anything else, if you're in business, you care about that, right? And so I think there's that piece, and that reflects in business school, right? Because in an MBA program, a lot of what you're doing is supposed to replicate what you're going to have happen in the real world. So that should matter to you. There's also things that increase in innovation and learning that takes place in diverse teams. They are more creative with ideating. It also typically, with more diverse teams, you have more psychological safety. So you have people that are able to think outside the box and more creatively. And people generally also are more satisfied. So it also, from a business perspective, that means you're retaining talent better. And also typically you're finding solutions faster. So that's the other thing, is that you're able to ideate quicker. And so if you're thinking about that business school being kind of a microcosm of what you see in the real world, having more representation from gender, from race and ethnicity, from cultural backgrounds, all of that is really important to a business school classroom. And I think business schools do work very hard to bring in very diverse classes every year. Shelley mentioned, the geographic diversity that they're able to bring in. Our partner schools do work very hard to bring in gender diversity, and we've seen a big change in that. So Forte, we were founded 21 years ago. Last year was our 20th birthday, but 20 years ago, business schools were about 25 to 30% women. Today, among our partner schools, typically that average is about 42%. So we've made huge gains on that representation piece. But kind of what Kira was mentioning, it's not just about representation, it's not just about showing up, but it's about what belonging really looks like as well. So those kind of takeaways from that McKinsey study are things like, how to deal with things like microaggressions in the workplace, which again translates basically directly into business school. That's also things about women managers, so women leaders and the type of leaders that women make. So there's a lot of great takeaways, and I see some of our business schools putting that into practice, which is really exciting to see, because the research is out there. That the answer is clear that diverse teams and diverse cohorts are really important. But then how do you actually implement change to make sure that they're successful as well while they're in business school? So that's a little bit about that. Hopefully that was not too much in depth. I won't read you the McKinsey study, but if you're not familiar with it, highly recommend it as some good reading.
Absolutely. And I will also too, Center for Women Leadership is another place, but McKinsey is great. And also just remember, when you're asking the question, I guarantee you there are others around you who would love to ask a question, but they're afraid to because they don't want to look dumb. So you, by asking these questions, it not only it encourages and develops your own leadership, but it also sets you up for additional leadership and courage and bravery in asking questions. So I want to take 2 seconds now, because Erin Nazetta has been extraordinarily patient listening in today. And so I wanted to share her question. Thank you for your insights. I'm an EMBA graduate who works in the financial services industry. I am a member of a Women in Investment Organization nonprofit organization. What are some of the most impactful programs or efforts you have seen that help women get into the financial services industry? What would your advice be to someone like me who wants to help more?
Ooh, can I answer?
All and yes.
I saw my question. I was hoping you were going to answer it. I'm going to plug 2 programs that Forte does. One is an undergraduate fast track to finance conference, and the other is a pre-MBA program that's a financial services fast track. And both programs are designed to help more women get into financial services. So if you're interested in learning more about that, send me an email, Erin. I'm Ashley@fortefoundation.org. Happy to point you in the right direction, because the absolutely is something we're keen on, and we do work directly with corporate partners that are looking to have more women in financial services. So we do 2 specific programs on that. Happy to chat more.
Perfect. Anybody else want to jump in?
I love those resources. And I will add that one thing I love about this generation that we're seeing in business school and that is coming from undergrad is the comfort with asking questions. I think, back when I was in school, it was like you were supposed to know everything. And so it was hard to ask questions, or you didn't want to look like you didn't know. And I see this generation being much more comfortable, which is the best thing. And things like Forte that create environments where women specifically, but people in general, can ask questions and kind of uncloak some things that have been historically more cloaked, and really get a behind the scenes look, because some of it is just exposure. And that's why I say I love apprenticeships and those kinds of things, because anywhere that you can expose yourself to someone who's doing those things, you just get to ask those questions. What's a day like? What's the experience like? And so I love that Erin wants to give back to that. And since I'm talking, I will answer her second question if I can.
I was going to bring it up because, yes, go.
Yeah. But just to finding and approaching men to serve as advocates, I think really just knowing what your goals are and finding somebody who you think will share in those goals. It's usually helpful if it's someone who's not a direct supervisor, but can be. But sharing what your goals are in a way that's sort of like, these are the things that I'm working on, and opening yourself to feedback so that they know that there's comfort with that feedback, and you're opening the door to that. And then being very clear about sort of what you're looking for, and how you're hoping to grow, and maybe doing your own analysis before that of things that make sense for you. These are strengths of mine, these are challenges of mine, this is where I'm looking to focus my time, so that you help them focus their feedback too. So, you don't get random feedback that you weren't looking for. But that's my piece. I'm sure some other people, since I just went blurry, I should probably stop talking.
So
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a book that we use with our students is Thanks for the Feedback. It's one that we actually give to our graduating seniors, because being able to accept feedback is so important if you want to be able to continue to receive it. There's a way to get it and a way to filter out bad feedback, because we've all received feedback that just doesn't actually relate. So knowing when to accept it and when to let it just kind of roll off your back and be like, thank you, and then let it go. But also just being in a position where you're asking for it and just letting people know, hey, I'm looking for this, and being willing to say, I want to grow. I mean, I'm literally doing that this summer, where I'm like, hey, I'm looking to grow. I'm one of those high achiever types. And so I just have to periodically let people know, yeah, I'm doing really great, but I'm looking to grow in these ways. Otherwise, they don't know. And so you just have to ask for it, and really, look around at the people who you admire, and kind of work your way up to it. And on your prior question, guys will reach out to people and say, hey, you may not know me, but we went to the same school. And they will get informational interviews. Do the same thing. It's the exact, I mean, it's the same thing as job interviews and job applications, where all the research says women think they need to have 100% of the qualifications. We think we have to have someone else open the door for us. We don't. Use LinkedIn, use your network. And it can be as simple as, hey, we both graduated from Georgetown. We both graduated from UTA. We both graduated from Purdue. Utilize those alumni networks. And then the other key is make yourself available. You're asking for the favor, so you become available when they're available versus asking them to wrap around your schedule. And I think you'll be amazed at how many people will be willing to meet with you for 15 minutes for an informational interview. You just have to ask.
Exactly. And I know, Chili, you wanted to say something.
I think we've summed it up. I think, yeah, we have some good answers here.
Yeah. And I was going to just say, people love to talk about themselves, and especially if they're male leaders. So let them.
We always say, I'd love to hear about your experience and insights.
Perfect question. Great opener. It's like, well, where do I begin? Yes. So let's talk a little bit about career outcomes then, right? And what are those, how do women MBA graduates compare to their male counterparts? Tina, you want to take a stab in starting this off?
Yeah, I had some general thoughts, and this really made me do some deeper conversations with our career team. And we participate in a consortium of schools with data. So I was looking at aggregate data, and and the news is good. You know, if you look at Forbes data for the gender gap, the gender wage gap in the US, it's about 84%. Women are making 84% of what men are making. When you start to look at aggregate, our aggregate data from schools, and these are probably top 20, top 50 schools, MBA programs, it's about 97%. Which is really nice to see. And that's looking at data over the last 5 years. And so that has been nice to see for our graduates. There's always room to grow, but that's one of the things. And I think it helps with those conversations where you kind of know how to present your value, you know how to negotiate salary, and the kinds of jobs that are coming forward. What we'd like to do is see that, you know, across the board for women. But those are it was nice to see that those numbers had shifted since I saw friends graduating.
Yeah, that's terrific. Shelley, what about you?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. It's interesting, you know, I think we do a separate employment report just for women so that women can kind of see where the other women are going and doing. And what I think is interesting is the industry breakdown. So, you know, for this last year, we had 39% go into consulting, which, you know, consulting is always a large percentage of the pie, but only 17% going to financial services, which is different than if you look at our men, right? Consulting and finance, in particular, finance is always rivaling in the high 30s. And so, you know, women are not gravitating towards financial services as much as men. There's obviously pay benefits of going to financial services. And then even technology, 18% of women went into technology. It's a little higher for men, but on par. So where are the women going? You know, they're going in higher percentages to, you know, social impact nonprofit, healthcare, government, consumer goods, and retail. And an interesting program that we launched 2 years ago as a Master of Science in Environment and Sustainability Management. So we've only had 2 classes go through the program, and we didn't market differently when we launched the program. So I was part of the launch committee. I managed the marketing firm that launched it. We kind of did everything similar to the other programs that we launched. And the first class had 80% women. And we were like, oh my goodness, wow. So we thought, okay, is this like a 1-year blip? Is this what's going on here? So our second class that's in right now, the second class, also 80% women.
Wow.
And again, didn't do anything different. We weren't doing different imagery. We weren't having different panelists, same. And so it leads me to believe that there are certain topics that women are more interested in, certain topics that they're not interested in. And so if there are aspects of your program that focus on, you know, sustainability, environment, nonprofit, government, are you elevating those enough in your marketing materials on your website to show women that that's a pathway? It's the first time in my career of working in business schools. I've worked at 4 business schools. The first time in my career that I had a man come to me and say, I wish there were more men in this program. And I said, well, that's a first. So, you know, but it's interesting. And so there are women out there who want graduate management education, but it's making sure that we're providing the right kind of substance or programmatic elements that attract them. So, yeah.
I'm curious about with your because each of you has different, you know, entrepreneurial programs and such. Have you seen any kind of movement and increase of female founders by chance? Tina? Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit. I would like to see more. I think our women are generally more financially risk averse. And so some of the things that we have tried to do is find financial support for women. So we have great summer programs that support students who are looking into a business idea. We have great like True Wealth Partners here in Austin, women venture companies that are really supporting women ideas. And so there's a lot of that. I think we're trying to work at the undergraduate level and kind of building that up. But I think women entrepreneurs like to have a little more financial security. There's sort of the great leap is harder, and you know, that responsibility is good. And so I'm glad there are women founders and VC firms that are looking more toward women founders and supporting them.
And Kara, sorry, Shel, go ahead.
No, it's interesting. I mean, we've seen, I wouldn't say uptick, but recently we've seen some women MBA graduates creating products that solve problems for women, right? And entrepreneurs have to solve problems for their customers. And there's been, two that come to my mind recently. One targeting at the rental of strollers and other high priced items. I mean, if you look at these strollers these days, $200, $300, $700, all these high price. And so how can you do cost sharing for that 2 years of life when some people can't afford that? Or, we had a group a few years ago that created a co-working space with childcare, right? Like, how do women go to work and solve the childcare problem, which is a huge issue in this country from a cost perspective? And so I've been excited and surprised to see women solving problems for other women and family members. So, yep.
I would think femtech, health tech, that sort of thing. And Kara, I think it would be really interesting to see what some of the work that you're doing with your techie females, shifting them into business and see what happens. Did you want to add something?
Well, I think one of the things that makes Purdue such an interesting space for that is we have a really high patent rate. So almost every month we have one of the highest rates of patents coming out of a university. And so we've got this really interesting dynamic where there's this really dynamic ecosystem for creating new innovation. And then it's how do we get it to market? So that's where the business school kind of comes in. And we've got a certificate for entrepreneurship that a lot of our undergraduate and our graduate students will layer on to one of their degrees. And so there becomes this really interesting mix of, we may not be all out in entrepreneurship, but they're layering it on because they're really curious. And so some students go full bore into, I know I want to be an entrepreneur, but a lot of them are saying, hey, I want that skill set. I want to start having that mindset because I think I'm going to go into consulting. I think I'm going to go work for Eli Lilly or a Fortune 100, Fortune 50 company for the first 5 years. But I have this idea in the back of my head. And when I start having a family or when I'm 10 years down the road, I want to have the background that when I'm ready, I can launch. And so, and there's one of the things that both Shelley and Tina were talking about with women is there's a lot of research that says women are interested in ethics of care. And so when we're recruiting women, when we're looking at these degrees, when we're talking about the ethics of care, which is sustainability, which is solving problems for specific groups, whether it's women or other groups that are normally overlooked, that's what women want to do. But what's fascinating is that's what millennials in general want to do. And so we're at kind of this inflection point where students want that, and they want the experiential learning. They want the chance to try it in college and see what it's like. And that's where case competitions, that's where working with companies and working with, like at Purdue, getting to work with professors or grad students who are getting these ideas that could change the world, but they don't know how to go from a patent to the market. And you get to come in and work with them and help them come up with their marketing plan and do that. Bridging the gap from tech to the marketplace can be really energizing and exciting for them. And then they're like, that's where I want to go. And so it being in college can give them that chance to try it and play with it. But I think a lot of them are saying, but that's 10 years down the road. I don't necessarily want to do it straight out of the gate from undergrad. And sometimes from a master's degree they do, but definitely it's rarity from undergrad.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tina, because I'm gonna.
I was just going to say, that work experience, some people will say like, oh, I wanted to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to this company, but not to underestimate the value of that work experience. One, from your credibility. If you go get funding later, I mean, if you're really trying to launch something big, that experience is so critical to people knowing that you have what it takes. We have a Kendra Scott Women in Entrepreneurial Leadership program. And so Kendra Scott, I'm not wearing her It Girl earrings today, but she is a jewelry maker here in Austin, and I've seen her total rise. And we had some students who got to work on her latest valuation where she got valued at over $1 billion, which was incredible. And the first thing she did was she came to UT and started a women leadership. And the cool thing about it is that it's at the intersection of the university. So there are so many different places. And I think this is what Kara was saying, that, that entrepreneurship gets layered onto. And so we are a major partner with the entrepreneurship minor But the women are coming from all over campus as part of this leadership. And she's created a program where they can innovate and create jewelry designs and all kinds of things that they bring into this very laboratory environment, which I think is a really cool way for, as Kara said, women to test that. And then not to underestimate the, you're not going away from entrepreneurship because you go into a company, but we look for people when we look at entrepreneurs in the admission process, and Shelley can speak to this too, we look for people who've started things. So have you been involved in a project that you've taken a leadership role in? Where have you advanced things, to have that stamina to build something? Because, it's exciting to build something and come up with a great idea, but you also have to show that you can kind of stay with the arc. So I think, learning those things along the way, you can get value no matter where you are in an entrepreneurial journey.
Absolutely. And I'll say most of the high school girls this week and last week, they're wearing Kendra Scott, and we're having them, their penultimate project is a Shark Tank pitch. So, in 4.5 days, they're going from, I don't even have an idea, to doing a Shark Tank like pitch, because it's another way to introduce the idea to them. Because for women, it can be a great path. But again, don't undervalue any experience, because everything validates and credentials you.
So all of this, and if you end up, regardless, if you do entrepreneurial, if you do your job, if you business school, what advice do you have for applicants who are also sitting there saying, oh my gosh, can I do this? How do I balance personal, professional? Who am I? Someone's always going to be left out. And more often than not, it's actually you. So Ashley, I see you. I want to tap you and see kind of what your facts and figures back there see, and then have each of you actually address that, because each of you has actually experienced it firsthand.
Yeah, I think instead of saying work-life balance now, I think we say work-life integration, which I think is really important because especially for women, and I think especially for a lot of people during the pandemic, there was no work-life balance. Those two things became one, right? Everything was all in our home. And if you had children or you had family obligations, aging parents, whatever it might be, like there was no balance to be had, right? It is really about how do you integrate all these facets of your life, and especially for when you're in school, whether that be undergrad or an MBA, there is not this line where you step out of the classroom and now you're a different person. You really want to integrate all of these pieces into one cohesive experience that you're having, so that you're not shortchanging kind of any aspect of yourself. And I think, Kate, what you were alluding to is really important, is you do have to have priorities, and you have to set priorities, and yourself should definitely be one of them. This is the idea of, I would say, put your own oxygen mask on first. And you cannot serve others. You can't pour from an empty cup, that sort of thing. I think especially this is really true for women in MBA programs, because oftentimes they might be thinking about whether they have a partner or a spouse, or they have, again, family obligations, they may have children. That work-life balance is going to be really difficult. And I think anytime you're adding other facet onto your life and through education, there's going to be some sacrifices that you have to make, and you are going to have to really understand what your priorities are. And so when we're working with women, especially in our launch program, as they're getting ready to apply to programs, it's making sure that they know what their priorities are. And if a priority for them really is the academic piece or the career piece, like what are the pieces of an MBA program that are most important for them, and how do they make sure that those priorities stay intact? But I also want to say that women absolutely can do it all. We just had our summer conference in Chicago. It was a great time. We had an attendee there who was there. She had young twins. Her husband was there to support her, which was great to see, male allies in the flesh. But you can do it all. And there is a place for you in business school, wherever you are in your life stage, if you will. But again, it's about understanding how to make sure you're putting your oxygen mask on, and what priorities are most important for you. And those might look different than your peers, but really understanding what's important to you as you go through this process, and how can you integrate successfully.
Yeah. Go ahead, Shel.
Yeah, I think I love all of this that Ashley said, and love the conference in the summer too. But, I think the role model aspect is really important for everyone, for anyone, no matter who they are. Having a role model is important. But but especially women who are wanting to kind of do it all. Share kind of a 30-second of my own story. I had done a master's degree down in Austin, and then was looking to go back and do an MBA, but I had a 4-year-old. My husband was working full time. My husband was in grad school full time. And so I was kind of like, should I embark upon working full time in grad school? But there was a woman who I met with who I had known. She had 2 children while she did the MBA, like birthed 2 children during a 2-year MBA. And I thought to myself, and I heard her story. I wanted to learn her story. How did she? And I thought, goodness, okay, if she can do it, then I can. And that was literally the pivotal decision moment. And so I think it is important, if you are going through that, to find someone that says, okay, I will support you. This is how you can do it. You may not be able to do 110% every day in all aspect of your life, but you can be successful. And so I'm so excited that we have, podcasts like this and organizations like Forte and other, different avenues where people can say, yep, I can do this, I can achieve my goals, and I don't have to put it to the side. And so, yep, share that.
Well, and when I did both of my grad degrees, the law degree at George Mason and my MBA at Daniels, I was working full time and went to law school at night. And then the MBA, I did it in the weekend program. Law school, I got bored my 4th year. So I had our oldest, my 4th year of law school, while working
As
full
one
time.
would.
Yeah. And then with the MBA, I was already teaching at Daniels. I was writing books. I had 4 kids. I was homeschooling. You can do it. My husband was a fundraiser. He still is a fundraiser. If you just have to know your why. You have to know why you've decided that this is the degree, why you're doing it, what you're working towards, and you have to know what you're giving up. So like, I don't watch TV, y'all. I don't watch TV. I'm watching the Simone Biles thing on Netflix because we're a gymnastics family. So I am watching that. But other than that, I don't watch TV. So you are going to have to give something up, but know why you're doing it. And for me, it was a value for my kids to watch their mom get a advanced degree, and to see that process, because higher education is a value in our family. And it also has made me a better professor. It's made me a much stronger professor because an MBA is a generalist degree. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, but being able to talk the language of all these different things, I still don't get finance, and that's okay. But I now know ROI and net present value and all that. I know enough. But getting that degree, I can now walk into any classroom and I can be like, okay. And when I do all of our recruiting events, I can be like, hey, if I can do it, you can do it. And I know you can do it. And here's why. And so it was a great degree. I loved getting it. It was fun. It was a lot of fun to get. And not everybody will tell you that, but I really enjoyed it because it's such a broad degree and it gives you so much information that you can use every day. And so the MBA is one I would do again in a heartbeat.
Tina.
That was a nice segue. I agree. I came from education and got my MBA back in the 1900s, and was really loved every class that I took because it made me think differently. You go into every business and analyze what's happening differently. You understand why Starbucks has their counter set up the way that they do. Everything that you're doing, how Amazon, you get curious about how everything works. And now there's so many podcasts to answer the questions of like how I built this and how does this work. And so I love that exists. For me, I'm the sandwich generation. So I'm between aging parents and I have teens right now. And so you just make different choices at different times in your life. And, my husband and I make decisions, who's stepping forward, who's stepping back, and he's done a lot to support me in my career, which I appreciate. I've traveled at times when I was footloose and fancy free, and I found jobs that had me traveling. So I used to do admissions and travel all over South America, Asia, Europe, etc. And then when I had small kids, I found other people who loved travel and they did a lot of that. And so I think you just find, as other people have said, different priorities at different times in your life and the ways to satisfy the things that are meaningful to you. And I know that every one of us has, I'm going to speak for everyone, but you can confirm or deny, a text hype girl group that you go to on a daily basis. And mine started on an election night. I'll just say that. And I have a group of college friends, and we're just there for each other for all the things. And sometimes it's just like, a text, and sometimes you get a page long, like, this is my crazy day. And so wherever you find that meaningful support, grab it, hold on to it, and nurture it.
All so true. So we've got another question from Brandy Martinez, and she's curious about, are there any podcasts that you would recommend for women in the workplace and business?
Since I'm unmuted, I'm going to share mine, which I actually wanted to share earlier. And I haven't listened to it in a year or so, so I believe it's still there, but Kim Scott's Radical Candor. She has a category, she has a 2x2 matrix, as all good consultants do. But there's a quadrant for ruinous empathy. It's dealing directly, it's having direct conversations, and caring. And so that's her 2x2. And if you care a lot, but you don't have direct conversations, that's ruinous empathy, which was something that I found, being a very caring person, and will sort of generalize that women can sort of be in that area. And they're very short, bite-sized, topic-driven podcasts. And she works with an organizational behavior person who I don't remember his name on the podcast. And she has a book that she's written, but the podcast is super helpful. And I've given it to lots of young women leaders who are having to have difficult conversations. And it just cuts out, it just helps you be direct and care about people through direct and transparent conversation. And that's a great one.
Without taking their stuff on.
Yep. And I do lots of audiobooks. I don't tend to do podcasts, though. I loved Kim Scott's Radical Candor. You do that with Good to Great by Jim Collins, his Level 5 Leadership and Get the Right People on the Bus with Radical Candor. Those two together, oh my word. That's all you need for organizational, getting people in the right places, HR type stuff. But I have a huge list on LinkedIn because people kept asking for my list of leadership books that I recommend, and I have my grad students read. And so I just put it on my blog, and there's a link on my LinkedIn profile. So if you need help finding it, let me know. But I have too many books to list here that either I have my seniors read, or in different classes I teach, I make available to my grad students, and they've all loved them. So that's what I tend to do to redeem the time. I listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Nice. Shelley? Ashley?
I was going to jump in, Shelley. I'll be quick. There's always HBR's Women at Work, which is a great one. It's not specifically, the other one I was going to recommend, not specifically about women, is Adam Grant's Work Life podcast. He's great. He just had, I think, I haven't listened to it yet, but the Australian's first female prime minister, I think, was on yesterday. So I'm a big fan. He interviews a lot of wonderful, powerful women.
This is gonna old school me, but I like print. I read magazine, like HBR. I pick it up, every month. So I haven't ventured into the podcast space, although I buy and purchase podcasts in my marketing professional world, but I'm a print person and a book person. So absolutely. Yep.
You should see my office, Shelley. It is like all books all the time.
I like to highlight and write notes. Like I can't do
I
the
often
whole Kindle
listen
thing.
and then I buy it so I can highlight it. Yep.
Nice. All right. Well, we're coming up on time, but what I wanted to do, and we could go on and on and on. And I wish we could. And so who knows, perhaps this will be the first of maybe a series. We'll just see. But I wanted closing remarks from each of you. What would you tell knowing what you know now after you've just survived all of it, and where you are today, what advice would you give to your younger self as you were getting ready to gear up to really take on this chapter of applying for business school?
Mm-hmm. I'll start. I think, life is finite, and the best investment you make is in yourself. And I think there's a lot of people who opt out of graduate management education because they think they're not the traditional student. I think if we all had $1 for every non-traditional student that introduced themselves to us, we would be,
wouldn't be here right now.
We wouldn't be here. So don't let your self-doubts not allow you to pursue something that you want to do. Find someone who can share their story, who can help you along the way, a mentor, but take one step in front of the other, and never look back. And you can do whatever you want, because there's so many people before you and all of us at our various schools who will help you along the journey. That's why we do what we do. And so just do it, and we'll be with you for the ride.
Perfect. Who wants to go next? Kara?
I would say don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20. Enjoy the journey. And so as an author, I've written 40 novels. I would just say, keep your eyes on your page, do the next step. Like Shelley was saying, do the next step in front of you, but stop comparing. Everybody's journey is different. And I guarantee the one that you have is going to be beautiful when you get to your chapter 20.
Yeah. Tina?
Don't try to find perfect. Experience is far better than perfect. And so jump in and get as many experiences and expose yourself to as many opportunities as you can, talk to as many people as you can, the informational interviews. Just you may want to go save the world, and there's time for that. I mean, you should get after it pretty soon, yeah, explore and jump in, and then you'll find your path. I say that because all the graduation speeches say find your passion, and I think that's stressful for students sometimes. Like, I don't know what my passion is, so just go do stuff.
Yeah, and you'll figure it out. Ashley?
I'm gonna use my favorite quote, which is on a bookmark from my favorite independent bookstore here, which is develop enough courage so that you can stand up for yourself and then stand up for someone else. And the important thing is your voice really matters. You are such an important piece of the future of women. So not only about being courageous for yourself, but think about being courageous for all those that are going to be listening to you and everything that you do.
So incredibly true. And yeah, I mean, you've got medicine to share with the world. So be generous. And because now more than ever do we ever need you. And I will say on the outset, it looks like it's really scary out there. I mean, and yes, there are definitely some things that are not great, but to what each of these women has said, and it's true, we're all here to help support you. And if you're not out there doing it, it will fall apart. So let's all gather together, raise arms, and go for it and make it happen. Because there's a reason why we have the babies. I'm just saying, because we really can do it all, and with grace and wisdom and wit and humor. So with that, I just want to say, Tina Mabley, Kara Putman, Shelley Henrich, and Ashley Lautzenheiser, I just want to thank you all for all that you've shared with us. If there are ways if folks want to get in touch with you, is it okay to link in with you and move forward? And I know the P&Q team will probably send out some follow-up with folks' email addresses, so don't be strangers. I'm Kate Byrne. Thank you so much. It has been my pleasure to have this conversation, and I look forward to so many in the future. And I can't wait to see every single person who's listening. Wow, you're going to do amazing things, and the world's going to be better off for it. So thank you in advance for all you're about to do.
Thank you, Kate.